Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make this card using Santa's Village grey rubber DL stamp from Creative Expressions. These stamps are just absolutely beautiful. They are absolutely jam-packed with detail, and so for that reason I'm going to be using my stamping press just to ensure that should I miss any detail I can go over it again. Using my Versamark ink pad, I applied a generous amount of ink all over the stamp, going back and forwards to ensure that I'd covered all areas. Then I stamped this onto a piece of card just smaller than a DL card blank and pressed firmly all over. I repeated this process several times to ensure that the stamp had impressed thoroughly onto the card. I would usually repeat this process several times, but on this occasion the stamp impressed really well onto the card and I didn't need to repeat the process. I then took the detail black embossing powder from Creative Expressions and applied a liberal amount over the stamped image. I shook off any excess and used a paintbrush to remove any that had stuck in areas that I didn't want it. Whenever I'm working with embossing powder, I always have a piece of scrap paper folded in half behind the project so that it forms a funnel, making it easier to pour the excess powder back into the pot. Now it was time to heat set the image. I used my heat gun on the highest heat setting and slowly and carefully went over the stamped image until all the embossing powder had melted. If you haven't done heat embossing before, you know when the embossing powder has set because it becomes shiny. I think most crafters would agree that the heat embossing process is one of the most mesmerising processes. I coloured my image using distress oxides. I used pumice stone to colour the ground of the image. It's perfectly okay to colour over the image at this stage because I'd heat embossed it, and by heat embossing that creates a non-porous surface so the ink just sits on the top of the embossing, therefore can be wiped off afterwards. I then went in with Stormy Sky to colour the sky, and I went back and forward a few times to make sure that the ink had blended and there were no harsh areas. Finally I went in with black soot. I went around the top edge and the side corners and blended it in to give the sky a moody / nighttime feel. And to give a smoother blend, I went back in with Stormy Sky and blended the black soot and the Stormy Sky together to give a more polished look. I took a microfiber cloth and buffed up the image. This removed any excess ink and gave the embossed area its shine again. I wanted to create a snowy scene for my image, and I personally find that the best way to achieve this is by mixing some white acrylic paint with some water to create a liquid, then taking a fine paintbrush and simply splatting over your project. The droplets will come out in large droplets, small droplets, and I feel this best represents natural snow. I didn't want the snow on the trees, and because I'd heat embossed them, it was easy enough to wipe off with a microfiber cloth. I then took my Copic marker in Y08 and coloured in the windows of the little cottage to make it look cosy. It was now time to start putting the card together, but where I had heat embossed the card, it had warped slightly. I find that the best way to tackle warping is by using a double-sided tape, and this straightens it out a little. I stuck this down to a piece of black card just larger than itself, approximately 2mm larger around each edge. And now you can see the card is really starting to come together. And then I stuck my image down to a DL card blank, using a bone folder to sharpen the folded edge as I went. I adhered this using double-sided tape again. Normally I would use a wet adhesive such as Cosmic Shimmer Dries Clear, but I still had a little bit of warping, and so I wanted to try and tackle this further by using more double-sided adhesive. Now all the card needs was a greeting, and for this I used my Designer Boutique Festive Wishes DL stamp set. There are so many fantastic greetings in this set, it's always hard to choose, but on this occasion I used "'Tis the Season." I used my woodware anti-static bag to prepare my card for stamping. I placed my stamp on an acrylic block and used my Versamark to ink up the stamp and then stamped this onto my black card. To emboss the sentiment, I used my Cosmic Shimmer white detail embossing powder. Fortunately, this came out perfect first time, but that was by using the woodware anti-static bag to prepare. Then I went ahead and heat set the embossing powder using the same process as previous. I trimmed this down to size and then went ahead and decided where I wanted the sentiment to go on my card. And once I'd decided, I took some double-sided foam tape, trimmed a piece down to size and added this to the back of my sentiment and placed this down to the card. And that completes the card. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please see below for links where to buy the Creative Expressions products used in this video. Until next time, take care, goodbye.